Elsie and the Magic Pen, written and illustrated by Courtney Katos. Chapter 1, Test Flight. "Go!" Elsie yelled. Tate jumped from the tree branches that were as skinny as his own arms and legs. His blonde hair glinted in the sunlight as he sped through the air. Elsie clutched her sturdy tree branch lower down in the big oak. "Wahoo!" Tate yelled. Elsie had convinced her neighbor to test the zip line they rigged to the tree between their 2 yards. Of course, it wasn't much of a zip line, made of a clothesline and a rolling pin. It also didn't take much convincing. At 10 years old, Tate was used to being the crash test dummy for his older brothers. Elsie watched, gritting her teeth so tightly that her jaw ached. She would have liked to have the bragging rights for herself, but she didn't want to risk breaking her drawing arm. Elsie held her breath, willing their invention to work. She pictured the 2 of them zipping fast all afternoon and laughing. They could make a whole adventure obstacle course and then charge people for entry. She had spent the morning sketching out detailed blueprints instead of doing math homework like her mother suggested. The only math Elsie was interested in was counting the dollars that would come in from the zip line, the shaky bridge challenge, and the chilling sprinkler gauntlet. For one glorious moment, Tate was gliding on their creation. His body bounced from side to side like a gummy worm. Then the rolling pin began to slip. The poorly made knot in the line untied. In a jolt, the whole thing dropped him in the hard dirt. His hand got a nasty brush burn. "Ugh!" Tate yowled, skidding on the seat of his jeans. A cloud of dust puffed up around him. Elsie slid down carefully from her branch. She swatted the air to clear the dust that floated her way. "That test flight was an utter disaster," she informed him. Elsie was 1 year older than Tate and liked to remind him of that by using phrases like utter disaster. She thought longingly about the expensive zip lines she had seen in the store. The kids on the box looked so happy, caught in joyful mid-flight for the photo. She looked over at Tate, who poked his bloody injury with a dirty finger. "These pants are the under disaster," Tate said, looking at the rip now showing his underwear. "Never mind that," Elsie said, looking away. "We need something to keep the rolling pin hooked onto the line, like maybe a clothes hanger, and something to keep the line knotted to the tree like—" Elsie flicked her messy, wavy hair away from her face while she thought. "My brother Lee," Tate interrupted. "He's a great knot maker. He ties my shoes together, and he ties the sleeves of my pajamas together. He even tied the twins together once." "No," Elsie said firmly. "No Lee. No other Gibbons for that matter. You and I are the only ones allowed to use the zip line. Don't even tell anyone about it." Tate was the only one of the 12 Gibbons children that Elsie could manage. They were downright unruly. Tate shrugged and sat back down to hide the hole in his pants. The sun glared at a harsh angle, making Elsie sweaty and irritable. She tried again to smooth her hair. She felt like her whole body was itchy from the inside out. "This isn't working," she huffed. "Nothing works right because it's all just junk and this town is so boring because no one cares about kids around here." Elsie tugged hard at the hair in her face. She snatched it into a lumpy ponytail. Her toe kicked at the rust-colored ground. The small cloud of dirt settled onto her sneakers like sad fairy dust. "If the zip line is busted, let's go in your basement. It's so nice and cold down there, and I'm pretty sure we could dig for dinosaur bones in the dirt floor," Tate suggested. "No, my basement is creepy. I wish it had concrete and painted walls like your basement instead of rock walls and dirt. It's always full of spiders," Elsie said. "Yeah, well, my basement is full of Gibbons." "Okay, then let's go to your room and talk about our trade." Tate was now trying to stand on his head. His untied sneakers flailed clumsily in the air. Elsie realized his underwear was showing right in front of her face. She hesitated. Tate was smudged with dirt and still bleeding. Elsie was pretty sure he had not brushed his teeth that day. His hair puffed out like a baby bird's messy feathers. Besides that, she wasn't sure she wanted to make this trade he was offering. While Elsie considered, another part of her brain began turning Tate into a drawing. This happened sometimes when she was deep in thought. A brown paper bag would be the paper for Tate's drawing since he was all covered in dirt. She could use charcoal for extra smudginess, sweeping through it with her fingers to make the fluffy hair. Dark strokes would make the long September shadows. Tate finally tumbled to the ground, and Elsie blinked away her mental drawing. He would probably break something in her room, but staying outside was too frustrating. "You can enter my room only if you repeat after me," she told Tate. Tate snapped his buddy at attention like a soldier. He pressed his eyebrows together in his attempt at a serious face. Elsie began, "I, Tate Excelsior Gibbons." "My middle name is not Excelsior," Tate interrupted. Elsie insisted. "I, Tate Excelsior Algernon Gibbons." Tate repeated. "I, Tate Excelsior Algernon Rutabaga Gibbons." Elsie continued. "Do solemnly swear to keep my grubby little mitts off of Elsie's stuff." Tate drooled and repeated, "Do solemnly swear to keep my bubbly spittle bits all over Elsie's stuff." Elsie glared. "Or suffer the ultimate punishment of imprisonment under the creepy cobwebby porch." Tate repeated, "Or suffer the ultimate punishment of eating Elsie's desserts and keeping her collector's cards for myself forever." Elsie looked at Tate and silently pointed 2 fingers to her eyes, then pointed to him to let him know she would be watching him. Tate silently pointed 2 fingers into his nostrils, then pointed at Elsie. A thin string of snot clung to his fingertip. She scrunched up her mouth to keep from smiling as they walked upstairs. Elsie's room was filled with her most prized art supplies. They were not the expensive professional kind. Her mom worked 2 jobs just to pay all of the bills. Most of the paints were used and picked up from a garage sale or end-of-year school throwaways. The drawing supplies came in a kit that was a birthday present from her aunt and uncle. Still, Elsie cherished them. The tools were organized into different cups on her desk. Elsie displayed her own artwork all over her walls. She also had posters of famous artworks hanging up, as if her art and the famous art were in a museum altogether. "How about the glitter crayons?" Tate asked. Elsie acted shocked. "No, not those." "How about that weird blue guy?" Tate asked, pointing to a piece of art. Elsie spun around. "No way! I won that at the school art show for being the most—" "Listen, do you want the magic wand or not?" Tate interrupted. He had been trying to convince Elsie that his brother had a mint-condition magic wand. Elsie sighed. "Victor is lying to you. Magic stuff is fun to think about, but it's not real." Even as Elsie said the words, she wasn't sure if she believed them. "Of course it's real," Tate insisted. "He got it from a friend who bought it in Romania, but couldn't work it right or something. Victor traded him 3 bags of chips for it. I traded 3 months of doing Victor's chores for it. Now you can trade me for it because magic wands are more your thing. And your modeling clay is more my thing." "Not your thing," Elsie said. She was disappointed in herself for even considering the trade. Still, there was a little voice inside of her that kept insisting, "What if?" She didn't exactly know where Romania was. Still, it sounded like a place that might involve strange, enchanted items. If Elsie had a magic wand, she could make her life just the way she wanted it. She wouldn't even have to wait to grow up first. For once, everyone would envy her and all the exciting things she could magic up for herself. But Elsie was in 5th grade and lived in sleepy old Darvinbrook, where there were no magic wands. Being friends with Tate was the most adventurous thing she could do. She brushed at a dirty spot on her jeans. Sometimes Elsie felt like day after day in her boring town was making her as faded as her worn-out clothing. "Tate!" Mrs. Gibbons called out their back door. Tate groaned and shoved open Elsie's window all the way, knocking over a cup of colored pencils. He pressed his face against the screen and yelled, "Coming!" Tate ruffled Elsie's hair into more of a mess. Elsie patted her hair, closed her window, and put her colored pencils back into place. "If this magic wand of yours is so amazing, then you should cast a spell on your brothers and sisters to make them obey you for once." "Yeah," Tate considered, "but then I'd be their boss, and I'd probably have to wear a suit like the principal, and neckties always choke me." He pinched the neck of his t-shirt tight and made a gagging sound. Elsie hated the sound of gagging. She pushed Tate hard through the bedroom door. She must have pushed a little too hard because he landed at the top of the stairs head first. After pausing for a moment to get his bearings, Tate simply continued sliding on his stomach down the stairs. He slithered, slug-like, out the front door and pulled it closed behind him with his toe. The house was quiet again with Tate gone. She rested her chin on her fist and stared at herself in the mirror, pretending to be her own twin sister. There was the same short but strong body that could open pickle jars and jump rope longer than anyone in her class. There was the button nose and round cheeks that made her look younger than she was. There were her eyes, the same color as the chestnuts she had eaten, piping hot with her mother last winter. Her mother wouldn't be home from work for at least another hour. Elsie was used to being alone since her father had left long ago, but that didn't mean she liked it much. Elsie went downstairs to heat a frozen dinner. The light coming in through the windows became cool and faint as evening approached. Elsie made a game of seeing how many wrinkled peas she could fit onto one of her fork tines before popping them into her mouth. Mrs. Mayberry looked tired after arriving home from work. She ate her own frozen dinner and hugged Elsie before leaving again for her night job. Elsie forced a smile as her mother left the house. Before she went to bed, Elsie got her bag ready for the next day of school. She picked up a pen that had fallen out and aimed it at her bag, waving it like a magic wand. In her mind, the bag became a safari knapsack. She aimed the pen at her clothes and imagined a fresh new shirt with anti-insect fabric. She twirled with the pen, and the room turned into a jungle. The leaves and vines were as shiny as her neon acrylic paints. Elsie closed her eyes and painted herself into the jungle with skinny monkeys and tropical birds. Elsie opened her eyes and sighed at the chipping paint on the walls. She shoved her school supplies into her backpack and got ready for bed. As she did every night, Elsie pulled her covers up tight to her ears and made her stuffed Siberian tiger face the door. She kept her lamp on while waiting for her mother's goodnight phone call. "I don't have much time, but I wanted to say goodnight," Mrs. Mayberry's voice came through the phone. "Also, I got you a surprise. It's from Oliver's Oddities downtown." Elsie grinned as she hung up the phone. Oliver's Oddities? Any kids who dared go in that store always said the same things. The owner was the grumpiest man alive, and the place was filled with the most unusual stuff around. It could be anything. A neon fish in a snow globe, light-up cowboy boots, or maybe giant butterfly wings to wear. Elsie closed her eyes, eager for the next day.